Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth, with your host, The Green Bard. This is Dany's Dragon Bonds, Volume 4, Part 3, Dragons in the Dark and the Sun's Son. This episode focuses on Rhaegal, Viserion, and Quentyn Martell, a Dornish prince who is not in the HBO show, but was sent to Essos by Prince Doran Martell in an attempt to fulfill a secret marriage pact. The episode starts when Dany shows the dragons to Quentyn and concludes with his ill-fated attempt at becoming a dragon rider. A Dance with Dragons, Daenerys 8. After the signing of the peace with Yunkai, Dany has an encounter with her dragons, introducing them to Quentyn Martell. The fact that she goes to the dragons at this point, symbols of violence and war, shows her deep unease at the conditions of this peace. The scene starts with dragon symbolism, and with Dany continuing the metaphor with dragons and violence, calling them fire and blood. "The dragon has 3 heads, Dany said when they were on the final flight. "My marriage need not be the end of all your hopes. I know why you are here." "For you," said Quentyn, all awkward gallantry. "No," said Dany, "for fire and blood." Now we switch to evidence of the parent-child bond. The dragons sense her presence, but they are not happy. The theme of protection comes up, of Dany being protected from their wrath. They have grown wild indeed. An answering roar from below made her flush with sudden heat. Prince Quentyn looked up in alarm. "The dragons know when she is near," Sir Barristan told him. "Every child knows its mother," Dany thought. Later, "They call to me. Come." She took Prince Quentyn by the hand and led him to the pit where 2 of her dragons were confined. "Remain outside," Dany told Sir Barristan, as the Unsullied were opening the huge iron doors. "Prince Quentyn will protect me." She drew the Dornish prince inside with her to stand above the pit. Their wildness and fury are savage indeed. The dragons craned their necks around, gazing at them with burning eyes. Viserion had shattered one chain and melted the others. He clung to the roof of the pit like some huge white bat, his claws dug deep into the burnt and crumbling bricks. Rhaegal, still chained, was gnawing on the carcass of a bull. The bones on the floor of the pit were deeper than the last time she had been down here, and the walls and floors were black and gray, more ash than brick. They would not hold much longer, but beyond them was only earth and stone. Can dragons tunnel through rock like the fireworms of old Valyria? She hoped not. In the next passage, we also see some evidence of the dragons' personalities here. If Drogon is Dany's equal, the most magical, cerebral, and wisest of the clutch, but a cold-blooded killer, like Drogo, then Rhaegal is the child-turned-teen, having a tantrum like his namesake Rhaego might have done. While Viserion is like his namesake Viserys, a bit unhinged and full of rage, as evidenced by his having destroyed one of his chains. By any comparison, they are fearsome, as Quentyn's reaction illustrates. The Dornish prince had gone white as milk. I had heard there were 3. "Drogon is hunting." He did not need to hear the rest. "The white one is Viserion, the green is Rhaegal. I named them for my brothers." Her voice echoed off the scorched stone walls. It sounded small, a girl's voice, not the voice of a queen and conqueror, nor the glad voice of a new-made bride. Rhaegal roared in answer, and fire filled the pit, a spear of red and yellow. Viserion replied, his own flames gold and orange. When he flapped his wings, a cloud of gray ash filled the air. Broken chains clanked and clattered about his legs. Quentyn Martell jumped back a foot. A crueler woman might have laughed at him, but Dany squeezed his hand and said, "They frightened me as well. There is no shame in that. My children have grown wild and angry in the dark." The Dragon Rider theme returns, and Dany perhaps plants a seed for Quentyn that he might also be a dragon rider, whether she means to do so or not. You mean to ride them?" "One of them. All I know of dragons is what my brother told me when I was a girl, and some I read in books. But it is said that even Aegon the Conqueror never dared mount Rhaegar or Meraxes. Nor did his sisters ride Balerion the Black Dread. Dragons live longer than men, some for hundreds of years. So Balerion had other riders after Aegon died, but no rider ever flew 2 dragons. The dragon lore is clear about that last part. While a dragon rider lives, no other rider can ride their dragon, while they also cannot ride any other dragon. Spoiler alert for House of the Dragon Season 2 or 3, skip the next 30 seconds if you don't want spoilers. The only known exception in trying to ride someone else's dragon is Joffrey Velaryon, who tragically fell from Rhaenyra's dragon Syrax in the attempt. As an aside, it will be interesting to see how Hotah handles this scene. I look forward to it. I also wonder how they will handle the fact that Laenor Velaryon supposedly survives, meaning his dragon Seasmoke should still be bonded to him, while Adam Velaryon, Adam of Hull, is scheduled to bond with Seasmoke early in the next season. How will they maintain that lore? Or will they ignore George R. R. Martin's rule? I might not like that. They could eliminate Adam's character. I would like that even less, but it looks like, based on episode 1 of season 2, that will not happen, given that we meet his brother Alan in the first episode. Either way, we were clued in here that Dany will only ever ride Drogon. From Game of Thrones, it seems like Jon Snow may eventually ride Rhaegal, which makes perfect sense if Rhaegal is named for Dany's lost brother Rhaegar, Jon's father. Will Rhaegal have a different rider before Jon? Victarion, perhaps? Who will ride Viserion? We'll cover Quentyn's aborted attempt at riding Viserion later, but as I've said before, I also wonder about Tyrion riding Viserion. Returning to the fearsome theme, it is convenient for Dany to use her blood of the dragon as a metaphor to try to convince him to leave the city. Quentyn, that is. Viserion hissed again. Smoke rose between his teeth, and deep down in his throat they could see gold fire churning. They are fearsome creatures. They are dragons, Quentyn. Dany stood on her toes and kissed him lightly, once on each cheek, and so am I. The young prince swallowed. I have the blood of the dragon in me as well, your grace. I can trace my lineage back to the first Daenerys, the Targaryen princess, who was sister to King Daeron the Good and wife to the Prince of Dorne. He built the water gardens for her. After they leave, as Quentyn has refused her invitation to quit the city, Dany tries to ignore the protestations of the dragons at being abandoned again. She cannot. Then you are truly a fool, Prince Frog. Dany gave her wild children one last lingering look. She could hear the dragons screaming as she led the boy back to the door, and see the play of light against the bricks, reflections of their fires. If I look back, I am lost. A fool he may be, but more importantly, Daenerys, the dragons are a part of you. You can't ignore them or this inconvenient truth. You need to understand them and embrace the good while trying to manage the bad. Otherwise, you truly are lost. A Dance with Dragons, the spurned suitor. The Sun's Son's plot to steal a dragon is hatched in this chapter when he approaches the Tattered Prince, leader of the Free Company, the Windblown. I say Quentyn is the Sun's Son because of the House of the Undying prophecy, of course. That refers to Quentyn. Tell me, Prince Frog, what would you have of me and mine? I need you to help me steal a dragon. As makes sense, the theme of power and value of dragons is also referenced in their bargaining. The Tattered Prince only leaned back on his stool and said, "Double does not pay for dragons, Princeling. Even a frog should know that much." The other main theme in this chapter is Quentyn's stubbornness in following through on his own violent path, against the protestations of his companions, of course, who are rightfully in fear for Quentyn's life if he were to follow through with this crazy idea. First they talk of the man who tried to fight Drogon in the fighting pit. He was brave. Would I have the courage to face that monster with nothing but a spear? He died bravely is what you mean. He died screaming, said Arch. A Dance with Dragons, the Dragon Tamer. Despite continued protestations from Arch and Drink in fear for Quentyn's life, Quentyn is decided to go through with his plan, in his conviction that coming back empty-handed would make him a failure. He deludes himself into thinking that Daenerys was challenging him to prove himself, even though she was clearly warning him to go home. Quentyn does have one slightly more logical reason to follow through. In A Dance with Dragons, the Kingbreaker, the Yunkish demanded that Hizdahr kill the dragons, so Quentyn might think that he's saving them. Of course, at the end of the chapter, George R. R. Martin banishes that fear. Dragons? The dragons have been loosed, sir. Still, despite the lack of suspense on Hizdahr attempting such a thing, Quentyn certainly could have used that risk in his calculus. He's at least wise enough to be afraid for himself as well. The jibe stung. Quentyn had never felt so much a boy as when he'd stood before Daenerys Targaryen, pleading for her hand. The thought of bedding her terrified him almost as much as her dragons had. What if he could not please her? Daenerys has a paramour, he said defensively. My father did not send me here to amuse the queen in the bedchamber. You know why we have come. In perhaps some foreshadowing of coming pain, Quentyn burned himself on a candle earlier in the chapter and remembers the pain while thinking of the dragons. Quentyn sucked at the burned spot on his palm. Doran remembers Aegon and his sisters. Dragons are not so easily forgotten. I'll discuss separately how I think that not long before burning himself with the actual candle, he communicates via glass candle with Quentyn Martell, and Alleras equals Sorella sand. Moving on, not only does he want to save the dragons, he has delusions of grandeur that he can save Dany too. In this, he also projects confidence that he will ride a dragon, likening it to riding a horse. While there may be an analog with some horsemen, including Dany as we've discussed before, Quentyn is clearly stretching reality here. She lives, she must. She is lost, but I can find her. And when I do, she will look at me the way she looks at her sellsword. Once I have proven myself worthy of her. From Dragonback? I have been riding horses since I was 6 years old. Then George R. R. Martin can't help but foreshadow the dragons going north in Westeros and struggling. If the dragons don't like rain, they definitely won't like snow and ice. The big man looked out toward the terrace. I knew it would rain, he said in a gloomy tone. My bones were aching last night. They always ache before it rains. The dragons won't like this. Fire and water don't mix, that's a fact. With that, we'll end this video and cover the attempted dragon taming next time. Thanks to all the terrific artists whose work is featured on this video. Thanks especially to those in my family who helped in this series so far. If you enjoy this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.